MGMT killed their career. That's what some people say. 3 songs from the same album made them famous, after they would do everything to not make another hit. So why they still relevant, if they are? Before the band's formation, one of the members, Andrew VanWyngarden, was the type of musician kid that had a band on high school. The first was a duo called Glitter Penis, making funny songs on PC, and the other was a rock band called Accidental Merch, where he played guitar. The last band had success in Andrew's hometown, Memphis, but the rock star dream was paused due to college. Andrew went to Wesleyan University in Connecticut. There he met his future MGMT partner, Ben Goldwasser. During a summer, Accidental Merch made a reunion and Andrew called Ben to play keyboard, but he broke the band. Actually, they officially ended due to unsuccessful shows. Andrew and Ben continued to play together in college as The Management, an ironic, goofy duo making fun of mainstream pop music. The Management was abbreviated to MGMT because there was a band with the name. Apparently, Wesleyan didn't have access to Google. But what was the musical context of the band's beginnings? In the 2000s, indie rock bands emerged from movements like post-punk revival, garage rock, and new wave revival. These bands came to declare war against commercial rock genres like nu metal and post-grunge. As with punks in the 80s against prog, their sound was well less produced and more DIY than the mainstream bands. You know that thing, let's look more authentic, showing that we don't have the money of the big companies. Also, computers and music software had become more accessible, allowing musicians to experiment with electronic sounds and creating genres like indietronica. Many of these indie bands were inspired by the looks and aesthetic of the 60s rock. For the more electronic bands, psychedelic genres was the source of inspiration, since they used digital sounds to make the trippy effects. Bands that developed the 60s psychedelia were called neo-psychedelia, and that's the main genre MGMT would be identified. People describe Andrew and Ben's first years in the management as unpretentious and playful. They play at parties only using keyboards, some electronic devices, and sometimes guitars. Despite of some lack of commitment, Andrew composed some songs that turned into some fine piece. We Don't Care and Time to Pretend. The last was released by Cantora Records, an independent label from Brooklyn that saw potential in their music. A demo album called Climb to New Lows was also released. It's funny that both EPs had hits and the last Time to Pretend, 2 of their biggest hits, but they chose to promote 2 different songs instead. After college, MGMT toured with Of Montreal. What made the group invest seriously in music was an offer by Columbia Records to sign a deal. In interviews, they kept saying that the band was just a fun experiment. They never thought a major label would be interested in their music. The truth is that they just didn't have enough self-esteem, because listening to the old material you find enough effort to do something decent. They wanted to do something enjoyable, or they would never play in public. Andrew and Ben accepted the deal and recorded the smash album Oracular Spectacular. Produced by Dave Friedman, who worked with neo-psychedelia bands like The Flaming Lips and Mercury Rev, the album was less ironic than MGMT's early works. Still, the band's sarcasm was present, especially with dead songs from their EPs. Kids, Time to Pretend, and the newest Electric Feel became their great hit songs. These 3 are classics for the hipsters, the subculture Andrew and Ben saw rising during their college days. When hipsters and Angie's List came to mainstream in early 2010s, people were looking for songs like Kids to listen. Public and critical success, Oracular Spectacular wasn't exactly in the front lines like Arcade's Fire the Suburb, but they made in the big festivals, film soundtracks. Sonically, the album is based on neo-psychedelia, with a strong indietronica pop direction, which wasn't exactly part of the label's interference. Kids and Time to Pretend were included due to label's request, but the songs were also part of their old repertoire. What came after Oracular Spectacular was an album that some people call it was self-sabotage. Congratulations was so contrary to produce any hit that almost had no singles. Even critics were not convinced that the band had gone from a colorful indie pop to a more melancholic and psychedelic prog. In live shows, MGMT would not include their biggest hit Kids as a sign of departure of that type of music. Today, Congratulations is one of the most revisited albums by the music community, a misunderstood cult classic. It has the band's definitive sound and is very close to some Oracular Spectaculars besides. They would highlight their influences in songs like Song for Dan Tracy, about the vocalist of the post-punk band Television Personalities, and Brian Eno, named after one of the greatest rock producers and pioneer of ambient music. Following the trend of self-titled albums, MGMT from 2013 was even more disappointing, considered their weakest album. The weird noises and chaotic sounds was too much for many, but the production choice to make it sound like it was all compressed inside of a box made it more confusing than strange. At that point, only MGMT main audience was listening to their music. The self-sabotage thing seemed to make sense because it was like they didn't want people listening to their music. The self-titled songs isn't bad, they are just not well produced in my opinion. So after a brief hiatus, the good reception of Little Dark Age released in 2018 was kinda a surprise. At first, the album sessions wasn't fruitful, but the duo opened up to collaborations. They worked with Patrick Wimberly of the synth-pop band Charlift, also with the hypnagogic pop singer Ariel Pink and psychedelic pop singer Conan Moccasin. The result was their highest rated album since the debut. Some may think the album was well received due to the more commercial synth pop and new wave sound more close to the debut album than the psychedelic experimentation from the previous two, but here I think they did a good job given the proposed sound direction. They may have played safe not doing too much experimentation, but I prefer to listen good music than pretentious songs trying to reinvent the wheel. What drove the album 2 years later was the track Little Dark Age, becoming a massive TikTok trend by the user ente.audios. To date, it has streaming numbers close to the Oracular's hits. The song have been used in many contexts and niches. I can't help but mention a study showing it's a popular track among extremist users, even though it's a song against the rise of the alt-right. This shows how powerful and recontextualized music can be, for good and for bad. MGMT's new album, Loss of Life, released weeks ago, has a similar sound to Little Dark Age. The theme is close as the process and the collaborators remain almost the same. I felt it's their last psychedelic album to date, with production additions of 103 Point Never and Danger Mouse. I think it's a good album, especially the second half. Loss of Life is their first album after leaving Columbia and the first with the indie label Mon More Pop Music. I think MGMT had a good time under Columbia, making 3 albums with nothing like any singles from Oracular Spectacular, but Andrew talked about escaping contract limitations like the minimum of tracks their album should have. If you like this type of content, please subscribe to my channel. I make videos about music and I will be glad to have your support. MGMT seemed to be slopping their first 3 albums, but today I think they have become an interesting indie band to watch for any release. Oracular singles burden have overcome. I mean, after 4 albums nobody can expect a new Kids. It's not impossible. If you do something else, you are likely to repeat it. They will always be best remembered by these songs, which is fine, they are great. I love Time to Pretend. It's a shame that some people boil down to just commercial songs, which is typical for cocky indies. But even with the self-titled, their discography is pretty consistent and worth to listen, which is what kept them relevant. Not trying to hit again was the best thing they've done, as they didn't become hostage to the market expectations. They make the type of music they like, have enough morals to work with great music figures. In my view, this is one of the best positions in the music business. What is your impressions about Loss of Life? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, and thank you for watching this far. Go check more videos about music in my other posts. I see you there.